Billionaire finds daughter's suicide note. Only her school counselor can save her. Mitchell Tarot stared at his daughter's empty bed. Her suicide note crumpled in his shaking hands. I can't live with this pain anymore, Dad. Don't look for me. The tech mogul who controlled billion-dollar empires couldn't control the terror consuming him. His phone buzzed, a text from Chloe's guidance counselor. I know where she might go. But you have to trust me completely. Would trusting a stranger be his daughter's salvation or his greatest mistake? The note had been tucked under her pillow like a twisted goodbye kiss. Mitchell's legs gave out as he sank onto Chloe's unmade bed, surrounded by the remnants of her 16-year-old life. Photography awards lined her dresser. Honor roll certificates covered her bulletin board, but none of it mattered now. His brilliant, beautiful daughter had vanished into the October night, leaving only 23 words that shattered his world. His first instinct was corporate efficiency. Call the police, deploy resources, control the situation. But Detective Morrison's voice carried the bureaucratic indifference of someone who'd seen this script before. Runaway teenagers usually come home within 48 hours, Mr. Tarot. We'll put out a BOLO alert, but at 16, she's not considered endangered unless there's evidence of foul play. Evidence? Mitchell's voice cracked. She left a suicide note. Kids write dramatic things when they're upset. Has she attempted self-harm before? The question hit like a physical blow. Had she? How would he know? Between board meetings and product launches, investor calls and international expansion, when had he last really looked at his daughter? When had he last seen past her polite smiles and perfect grades to notice the shadows under her eyes? 3 years ago, cancer had stolen his wife, Sarah. Since then, he'd buried himself in work, building Tarot Technologies into a tech empire worth billions. Success had been his anesthesia, achievement his way of avoiding the gaping hole Sarah's death had left. But now, staring at Chloe's note, he realized his daughter had been drowning in that same hole while he'd been too busy climbing mountains of money to notice. His phone buzzed against his palm. The text was from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Tarot, this is Lorraine Marlowe, Chloe's guidance counselor at Westfield Academy. I know about Chloe's disappearance. I know where she might go. But you have to trust me completely. Mitchell's thumb hovered over the reply button. Trust a stranger? He'd built his fortune by trusting no one, verifying everything, maintaining control. But control had failed him tonight. His resources, his money, his power. None of it could bring back his daughter. Another text appeared. Meet me at your house in 20 minutes. Don't call anyone else yet. Chloe confided things to me that might help us find her, but I need to explain in person. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across his circular driveway. Mitchell watched from his floor-to-ceiling windows as a modest Honda Civic parked beside his collection of luxury vehicles. The contrast wasn't lost on him. Her practical car looked almost apologetic next to his Ferrari and Bentley. The woman who approached his front door moved with quiet purpose. Even in the porch light, he could see she was beautiful, but not in the polished way of the women in his corporate world. This was something deeper, more authentic. Natural curls framed her face, and despite the late hour and obvious stress of the situation, her warm brown eyes held steady strength. Mr. Tarot? Her voice carried the slight rasp of someone who'd been crying recently. I'm Lorraine Marlowe. Up close, she was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'6" to his 6'3", but something about her presence filled the doorway. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, no jewelry except small gold earrings, but she commanded attention in a way his diamond-draped business associates never could. You said you know where Chloe might go. He stepped aside to let her enter, noticing how she took in his marble foyer and crystal chandelier without the usual awe or judgment. How could you possibly know that when her own father doesn't? Lorraine's expression softened with something that looked like pity, and it cut deep. Because she talks to me, Mr. Tarot. She has been for 6 months, ever since she started having panic attacks during calculus. Panic attacks? The words hit him like cold water. Chloe gets straight A's in calculus. Yes, she does. She's brilliant. But brilliance doesn't protect teenagers from trauma, and your daughter has been carrying more pain than any 16-year-old should have to bear alone." They moved into his living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights below. Lorraine declined his offer of coffee or water, perching on the edge of his Italian leather sofa with the careful posture of someone unaccustomed to luxury but too polite to show it. "Tell me what you know," Mitchell demanded, pacing behind his chair rather than sitting. Corporate habits died hard. He'd always conducted difficult negotiations on his feet. "Chloe blames herself for her mother's death." The words stopped him mid-stride. "That's impossible. Sarah died of cancer. Chloe was 13. Impossible to you, maybe, but 13-year-olds don't process death the same way adults do." Lorraine's voice carried the gentle authority of someone accustomed to delivering difficult truths. The last thing Chloe said to her mother was that she hated her for missing the school science fair because of a chemo appointment. Mitchell's legs went weak. He sank into his chair, memories flooding back. That science fair. He'd missed it too, staying at the hospital with Sarah. They'd both apologized to Chloe later, explained that sometimes adult responsibilities had to come first, but they'd never asked how she felt about it. "Sarah died 2 weeks after that science fair," Lorraine continued quietly. In Chloe's mind, her mother's last memory was of her daughter saying, "I hate you." She's carried that guilt for 3 years, Mr. Tarot. And lately, with you working more and more, she's convinced that everyone she loves eventually leaves. I work to provide for her, to secure her future. She doesn't need financial security. She needs her father. Lorraine leaned forward, and something in her tone made him look up. "When did you last have dinner together? Not a working dinner where you checked emails between courses. When did you last ask about her day and actually listen to the answer?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Mitchell tried to remember, scrolling through weeks of takeout eaten in his home office, brief conversations in hallways between meetings, goodnight kisses planted on Chloe's forehead while she pretended to sleep. "You think I'm a terrible father. I think you're a grieving man who learned to survive by staying busy. But grief doesn't disappear just because we ignore it, Mr. Tarot. It festers, and children absorb their parents' unprocessed pain like sponges." Her words carried no judgment, which somehow made them hit harder than accusations would have. This woman, this stranger, understood his daughter better than he did. The realization was humbling and terrifying in equal measure. "You said you know where she might go." Lorraine nodded, pulling out her phone. "There's an abandoned warehouse district about 15 miles from here. Kids call it the Forgotten Quarter. It's where teenagers go when home doesn't feel safe anymore. Chloe mentioned it once when we were discussing her favorite photography spots." "Then let's go." Mitchell stood, already reaching for his keys. "Wait." Her voice stopped him. "If we find her, you can't just drag her home and pretend this didn't happen. She needs professional help processing her trauma. She needs family therapy. She needs a father who's present, not just providing." "And if we don't find her?" The question came out rougher than he intended. Lorraine's eyes reflected the same fear that was eating him alive. "Then we keep looking." "But Mr. Tarot, Mitchell, if you want your daughter back, you need to be willing to change. Really change. Not just promise to work fewer hours or take more vacations. You need to learn how to be present for the pain instead of running from it." Something in the way she said his first name, like she'd been thinking of him as Mitchell rather than Mr. Tarot, made him look at her more closely. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, spent worrying about other people's children, and her hands bore the subtle calluses of someone who'd worked their way up from nothing. "Why are you doing this? Going above and beyond for a student?" "Because I've been where Chloe is." The admission came quietly. Foster care teaches you that people leave, that love is temporary, that you're ultimately on your own. I see that same isolation in your daughter's eyes, and I know how dangerous it can be when a teenager believes she's truly alone in the world. Rain began pattering against the windows, soft at first, then building to a steady downpour. Mitchell watched water stream down the glass and felt something shift inside his chest. This woman had just shared something deeply personal to make him understand his daughter's pain. When was the last time anyone had been that vulnerable with him? "We should go," Lorraine said, glancing at the weather. If she's out there in this. They didn't finish the sentence. Both knew what October rain could do to a 16-year-old girl who'd been wandering for hours. The drive through Seattle's industrial district revealed a part of the city Mitchell had never seen. His GPS led them through neighborhoods where his luxury car drew stares, past shuttered factories and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Lorraine navigated from the passenger seat with the confidence of someone who knew these streets personally. "Turn left here," she said, pointing toward a gap between two buildings. "The warehouse complex is through there." Mitchell maneuvered his car down what was barely more than an alley. Graffiti-covered brick walls and broken streetlights left pools of darkness between scattered patches of yellow light. This was exactly the kind of place corporate Mitchell would have avoided, the kind of area he'd donate money to clean up rather than visit himself. There. Lorraine pointed toward a massive brick building with boarded windows and a partially collapsed roof. "That's where kids go to be invisible." They parked and stepped into the rain. Mitchell's Italian leather shoes were soaked within seconds, his tailored suit offering no protection against the October chill. But Lorraine moved with purpose toward a gap in the building's chain-link fence, clearly familiar with urban exploration. "Chloe!" Her voice echoed off wet brick walls. "Chloe, it's Miss Marlowe. Your dad's here too." They squeezed through the fence gap and approached the building. Up close, Mitchell could see how kids had made this place their own. Someone had spray-painted "Sanctuary" above what used to be the main entrance. Cardboard and tarps created makeshift shelters in doorways. This wasn't just urban decay, it was a community of the forgotten. "She mentioned this place during one of our sessions," Lorraine explained as they picked their way across debris-strewn ground. "Said it was where she came to think, where she could be alone with her camera without anyone asking if she was okay." They entered through a gap where a loading dock door had been pried open. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of rust and abandonment. Rain fell through holes in the roof, creating dozens of small waterfalls that echoed in the vast space. But scattered throughout were signs of recent habitation: sleeping bags, battery-powered lanterns, even a small camp stove. "Chloe!" Mitchell's voice boomed across the space, desperate and commanding. "Chloe, please! I know you're here!" Silence answered him, broken only by dripping water and the distant rumble of traffic. "She won't respond to demands," Lorraine said gently. "Try asking instead of telling." Mitchell swallowed his pride and his panic. "Chloe? Sweetheart, I'm scared. I found your note and I need to know you're safe. Please, can you just let me know you're okay?" A sound came from somewhere deeper in the building. Not a voice, but movement, footsteps on metal. They followed the sound through a maze of rusted machinery and abandoned office cubicles. Rain continued to pour through the roof, turning the floor into a treacherous landscape of puddles and slick concrete. Mitchell's designer shoes provided no traction, and twice he nearly fell. The second time he slipped, Lorraine's hand shot out to steady him. Her fingers wrapped around his forearm, and even through his wetsuit jacket, her touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. She was strong, her grip sure and confident. When he looked down at her, water droplets clung to her dark eyelashes, and her natural beauty struck him like a revelation. "Careful," she murmured, but didn't immediately let go. For a moment that lasted both forever and no time at all, they stood in the rain-soaked warehouse looking at each other. Mitchell became intensely aware of her hand on his arm, the way her breath created small clouds in the cold air, how close they were standing. Inappropriate didn't begin to describe the attraction he felt, but it was undeniable. The moment broke when they heard it again, definitely footsteps, coming from a stairwell that led to what used to be the building's offices. "Chloe," Lorraine called softly. "Honey, we're not here to drag you home. We just want to talk." They climbed the metal staircase together, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. At the top, they found a maze of abandoned offices with broken windows and water-stained walls. But in one corner, battery-powered camping lanterns created a circle of warm light. Chloe sat in the middle of that light like a broken angel. Mitchell's heart nearly stopped. His daughter was soaked through, her long, dark hair plastered to her skull, her lips blue with cold. She'd wrapped herself in what looked like an old tarp, but she was clearly hypothermic. Her camera sat beside her, and scattered around the lanterns were dozens of photographs, all of empty places, abandoned buildings, forgotten corners of the city. "Oh, baby." Mitchell's voice cracked as he started toward her. "Don't!" Chloe's voice was barely a whisper, but it stopped him in his tracks. "Don't come closer. Don't try to fix this. Don't tell me everything's going to be okay." "Chloe," he began, "I heard you on the phone with Detective Morrison." She interrupted, her words slurred from cold and exhaustion. "Runaway teenagers usually come home within 48 hours, like I'm just some statistic. Like this is just teenage drama." Mitchell felt like he'd been slapped. He had said those exact words to his assistant when she'd asked if he needed to cancel tomorrow's board meeting. Lorraine stepped forward slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. "Honey, you're hypothermic. Whatever you want to say, whatever you need us to understand, you can tell us somewhere warm." "No," Chloe shook her head violently. "If I go home, he'll just go back to work. He'll hire me a therapist like he hires cleaning ladies and tutors. He'll throw money at the problem and consider it solved." "That's not," Mitchell started. "When's my birthday, Dad?" The question hit like a physical blow. "Chloe, when is my birthday?" Mitchell's mind went blank. December? January? Sarah had always handled birthdays, anniversaries, school events. Since her death, his assistant managed his calendar. But Chloe's birthday? "December 15th, Lorraine said quietly. Mitchell stared at her in shock. His daughter's guidance counselor knew his child's birthday when he didn't. "See?" Chloe's voice broke. "She knows me better than you do. She knows I blame myself for Mom's death. She knows I have panic attacks. She knows I feel invisible in my own house." "I'm sorry." The words tore out of Mitchell's chest. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. I know I haven't been present. I know I've failed you since Mom died. But please don't punish yourself for my mistakes." "It's not punishment." Chloe struggled to her feet, swaying dangerously. "It's just easier to disappear, to stop pretending everything's fine." She took a step toward the window, and Mitchell realized with horror that they were 3 stories up. Rain poured through the broken glass, creating a treacherous ledge that no one should navigate in her condition. "Chloe, stop!" His voice boomed across the space, but his daughter kept moving toward the window, not suicidally. She was just cold and disoriented, drawn to the sound of rain. But the floor was slick, the ledge was crumbling, and one wrong step. Mitchell lunged forward just as Chloe's feet went out from under her. He caught her as she fell, but their combined momentum sent them both sliding toward that broken window. For a terrifying moment, Mitchell thought they were both going over. Then, Lorraine's strong hands grabbed his jacket, hauling them both back from the edge. The 3 of them collapsed in a heap on the wet floor, Chloe unconscious from exhaustion and hypothermia, Mitchell's arms wrapped around his daughter's limp form, and Lorraine holding them both. "We need to get her to a hospital," Lorraine said, but her voice seemed to come from far away. Mitchell looked down at his daughter's pale face and felt something break inside his chest. Not the clean break of grief, but the messier fracture of guilt and terror and desperate love. This was his fault. His brilliant, beautiful daughter had been in pain for 3 years, and he'd been too busy conquering the business world to notice his child was drowning. "I can't lose her," he whispered, and only then realized he was crying. "I can't lose her too." Lorraine's hand found his shoulder, warm and steady despite their soaked clothes and the cold warehouse around them. "You won't. But Mitchell, you have to be willing to change. Really change." He looked up at this woman who'd known his daughter better than he did, who'd come out in the rain to help find a missing teenager, who'd just helped save both their lives. Her hair was plastered to her head, her makeup long since washed away by rain and worry, but she'd never looked more beautiful. "I don't know how," he admitted. "You start by showing up," she said simply. "Not just physically, emotionally. You show up for the pain instead of running from it. Have you ever felt that desperate fear when someone you love disappears into darkness? That moment when you realize you'd trust anyone, even a complete stranger, if they could bring your child home safely. Tell me about a time when crisis brought unexpected people into your life. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if Mitchell and Lorraine's desperate search is already pulling at your heartstrings. They carried Chloe down those metal stairs together, Lorraine supporting her legs while Mitchell cradled her upper body. Every step was treacherous on the wet metal, but they moved with careful coordination, like they'd been doing this dance for years instead of hours. In the car, Lorraine sat in the back seat with Chloe's head in her lap, monitoring her breathing while Mitchell drove to Seattle Children's Hospital with the desperate precision of a man who'd already lost too much. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every moment Chloe didn't respond to their voices felt like another small death. Talk to her, Lorraine instructed as they sped through empty streets. She can hear you, even unconscious. Tell her what you should have said months ago. Mitchell's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Chloe, I'm sorry I missed your science fair. I'm sorry I didn't know about your panic attacks. I'm sorry I thought money could replace presents. His voice cracked. Your mom would be furious with me right now. She always said you were the most important project I'd ever work on, and I've been treating you like a side task. In the rearview mirror, he saw Lorraine's eyes fill with tears. Chapter 2. The hospital became their world for the next 18 hours. Chloe wasn't in life-threatening danger, severe hypothermia and dehydration, but nothing that warm blankets, IV fluids, and time couldn't heal. The real damage, as Lorraine gently explained to the emergency room doctor, was emotional. Mitchell had never felt more helpless. In boardrooms, he commanded attention and respect. Billion-dollar deals bent to his will. But in that sterile hospital room, watching his daughter sleep off her exhaustion, he was just another father who'd failed to protect his child from pain. Lorraine never left. She'd called in sick to work, arranged for another counselor to cover her appointments, and settled into the uncomfortable visitor's chair like she planned to stay forever. Mitchell offered to get her coffee, food, anything she needed, but she declined with quiet grace. You don't have to stay, he told her around 3 a.m, when the nurse's station had gone quiet, and the only sounds were medical equipment beeping in nearby rooms. Yes, I do. She was watching Chloe sleep, and something in her expression made Mitchell study her more carefully. I promised her I wouldn't leave her alone with her pain. That includes making sure she doesn't wake up to find that the adults in her life have disappeared again. The words stung because they were true. How many times had Mitchell promised to be there for something important, only to get pulled away by work emergencies? How many dinners, school events, and quiet moments had he sacrificed on the altar of professional success? Tell me about yourself, he said suddenly. It was an abrupt change of subject, but sitting in that hospital room in the small hours of the morning, normal social protocols seemed irrelevant. Lorraine looked surprised. What do you want to know? Everything. You know more about my daughter than I do. You dropped everything to help find her. You're sitting in an uncomfortable chair at 3 a.m. for a student you've known 6 months. I want to understand who you are. She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the careful tone of someone unaccustomed to talking about herself. I grew up in foster care, 11 different homes between the ages of 7 and 18. She kept her eyes on Chloe as she spoke, as if watching his daughter sleep made the confession easier. Most were fine. Some were not fine, but all of them were temporary. Mitchell felt something twist in his chest. Your parents. Drug overdose when I was 7. I found them. The words came out flat, clinical, like she'd learned to drain the emotion out of the memory to make it bearable. The first responders were kind, but I remember thinking that if I'd been a better daughter, maybe they wouldn't have needed the drugs. Maybe they would have wanted to stay alive for me. The parallel to Chloe's guilt about her mother's death was painfully obvious. Mitchell began to understand why Lorraine had recognized his daughter's pain so clearly. Foster care taught me that people leave, she continued. That love is conditional. That if you're not perfect, if you're too much trouble, if you need too much, you get moved to the next placement. She finally looked at him. I see that same fear in Chloe's eyes. The belief that she's somehow responsible for the people she loves disappearing. But you stayed in foster care until 18. Someone must have wanted to keep you. A smile ghosted across her face, sad and beautiful. The Washingtons, Keisha's parents, they took me in when I was 15, wanted to adopt me. But I was so convinced they'd changed their minds that I sabotaged it, picked fights, broke rules, pushed boundaries until they had no choice but to ask for me to be moved. Do you regret that? Every day. The admission was so quiet, he almost missed it. But at 15, choosing to leave felt safer than waiting to be abandoned. They sat in comfortable silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts. Mitchell found himself studying Lorraine's profile in the dim hospital lighting. She was beautiful, but it was her strength that drew him, the quiet resilience of someone who'd survived things that would have broken other people. Around dawn, Chloe began stirring. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and disoriented, scanning the hospital room before landing on Mitchell's face. "Dad?" Her voice was hoarse from cold and exhaustion. "I'm here, sweetheart." He leaned forward, resisting the urge to bombard her with questions and apologies. "How do you feel?" "Stupid." The answer surprised him with its honesty. "And cold. And embarrassed." "You have nothing to be embarrassed about," Lorraine said gently from her chair. "You were in pain, and you tried to handle it alone. That's not stupid. That's human." Chloe's eyes filled with tears. "I really wasn't trying to... I didn't want to die. I just wanted the hurt to stop." Mitchell's throat tightened. "I know, baby. And I'm sorry it took you running away for me to realize how much you were hurting. Are you going to send me away?" The question was so small, so vulnerable, that Mitchell felt his heart crack open. "Send you away?" "Chloe, no. Never." "Why would you think that?" "Because I'm too much trouble now. Because I'm broken like Mom was before she died, and you can't fix me with money or work or ignoring the problem until it goes away." Mitchell looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw Sarah's eyes reflecting 3 years of accumulated pain. His wife had fought cancer with fierce determination, but in the end, the disease had been stronger. He'd thrown himself into work after her death, partly because watching her suffer had left him feeling helpless, and helplessness was an emotion Mitchell Tarot didn't know how to process. "You're not broken," he said finally. "You're grieving. There's a difference, and I'm going to learn how to help you grieve instead of trying to make it disappear." Over the next few hours, as Chloe's strength returned and the medical team confirmed she was physically stable, the three of them began having the hardest conversations of their lives. Lorraine facilitated with professional skill, but Mitchell could see this was personal for her too. Every breakthrough Chloe made seemed to heal something in Lorraine's eyes as well. They talked about Sarah's death and the guilt both father and daughter carried. They talked about Mitchell's emotional absence and Chloe's fear of abandonment. They talked about depression, therapy, family counseling, and the long road ahead. But they also talked about smaller things. Chloe's photography and her dream of studying art in college. Mitchell's early days as a programmer, building his first computer in his college dorm room. Lorraine's work with other at-risk teenagers and the foster siblings she'd helped reunite with their families. By the time Chloe was discharged that evening, something fundamental had shifted between all three of them. They weren't fixed. Healing doesn't happen overnight. But they were honest. The polite facades had crumbled, revealing the messy, complicated, real people underneath. Mitchell drove them to Lorraine's apartment instead of home. It was a modest place in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of building where teachers and social workers lived. But when Lorraine unlocked her door, Mitchell was struck by how warm and welcoming her space felt. Books lined every wall, plants thrived in sunny windows, and photographs covered every surface, not professional portraits, but candid shots of real moments. Children laughing, families embracing, seniors holding hands on park benches. It was a home created by someone who understood that love lived in small gestures and genuine connections. "I make terrible coffee but excellent hot chocolate," Lorraine offered, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Chloe actually smiled. "Hot chocolate sounds perfect," Mitchell said, surprised by how much he meant it. They settled into her living room, Chloe curled up on the couch under a handmade quilt, Mitchell perched somewhat awkwardly on the edge of an armchair that had clearly been chosen for comfort rather than style. Everything in Lorraine's apartment had been chosen for warmth and function, so different from his own sterile showcase of expensive furniture. "Miss Marlowe," Chloe said as Lorraine handed her a steaming mug, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if your parents hadn't died?" Lorraine settled into her own chair, cradling her mug like a prayer. "Every day. But I've learned that wondering about different possibilities is just another way of avoiding the life you actually have. Do you think my mom would be disappointed in me? For running away, I mean." Mitchell started to offer reassurance, but Lorraine held up a gentle hand, and he realized his daughter needed to hear this from someone other than him. "I think your mom would be heartbroken that you've been carrying so much pain alone," Lorraine said carefully. "But disappointed? Number. I think she'd be proud that you survived 3 years of grief and still managed to be a straight-A student who takes beautiful photographs and cares deeply about other people." "How do you know I care about other people?" "Because you've been protecting your father's feelings this whole time. You've been hiding your pain so he wouldn't have to deal with it. That's not selfish behavior, Chloe. That's the action of someone who loves deeply and puts other people's needs before their own." Mitchell felt like he'd been punched. His daughter had been protecting him. All this time, he'd thought he was shielding her from his own grief by staying busy and maintaining normalcy. Instead, she'd been carrying both their emotional burdens alone. "I'm going to do better," he said suddenly, interrupting the moment. Both women looked at him. "I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. I'm going to learn how to be present for difficult emotions instead of running away. I'm going to show up for therapy appointments and school events and regular dinners where I actually put my phone away and listen." "Dad," Chloe said softly, "you don't have to promise to be perfect. You just have to promise to try." The simple wisdom of his 16-year-old daughter brought tears to his eyes. When had she become so wise? When had she learned to offer grace he didn't deserve? They talked until late, the conversation flowing more naturally than any Mitchell could remember having with his daughter in years. Lorraine had a gift for asking the right questions, for creating space where difficult truths could be spoken without judgment. More than once, Mitchell found himself studying her profile as she listened to Chloe, admiring the way she gave his daughter her complete attention. There was something magnetic about Lorraine's presence, not the polished charisma of the women in his business world, but something deeper. She listened with her whole body, responded with careful thought, and created safety with her very presence. Mitchell found himself wondering what it would be like to be the focus of all that attention, to be seen and understood with that same gentle intensity. When Chloe fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the day's emotional revelations, Mitchell and Lorraine found themselves alone together for the first time since the crisis began. "Thank you," he said, but the words felt inadequate. "You saved my daughter's life. You probably saved our relationship. I don't know how to repay that." "You don't repay it," Lorraine said quietly. "You honor it by being the father she needs going forward." They were sitting closer now, both watching Chloe sleep peacefully for the first time in who knew how long. The lamp cast warm light across Lorraine's face, and Mitchell noticed details he'd missed in the chaos of the last day. The way her natural curls caught the light, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the strength in her hands as she adjusted the quilt around his daughter. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, echoing Chloe's earlier question. Lorraine's smile was soft. "Turnabout is fair play. Why aren't you married? Dating someone? You're..." He struggled for words that wouldn't sound inappropriate. "You're remarkable. Any man would be lucky to have you in his life." She was quiet for a long moment, and Mitchell worried he'd overstepped. But when she answered, her honesty took his breath away. "Because I'm scared," she admitted. "Foster care taught me that people leave, remember? I've spent my adult life building walls to protect myself from that kind of abandonment. I tell myself my students need me, that I don't have time for relationships, but the truth is, I'm terrified of letting someone close enough to hurt me. That's a lonely way to live, says the man who buried himself in work after his wife died. The observation hit home. Fair point. They smiled at each other, recognizing the shared patterns of self-protection. Mitchell felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Not just attraction, though Lorraine was undeniably beautiful. This was deeper. Recognition, connection, the rare pleasure of being truly seen by another person. I should take Chloe home, he said, though he made no move to wake his daughter. She's exhausted. Let her sleep. Lorraine's voice was soft, mindful of not disturbing Chloe. Besides, when was the last time you saw her look that peaceful? Mitchell studied his daughter's face, relaxed in genuine rest for the first time in months. Dark circles under her eyes were fading, and the tight worry lines around her mouth had smoothed away. I can't remember. Healing takes time. For both of you. They sat in comfortable silence, the only sounds Chloe's steady breathing and the soft ticking of an antique clock on Lorraine's mantel. Mitchell found himself studying the photographs covering her walls and side tables. Most showed children and teenagers, candid shots of young people laughing, embracing, achieving small victories. Your students, he asked, nodding toward the pictures, some current, some former. That girl there, Lorraine pointed to a photo of a young black woman in a graduation cap and gown, was living in her car when I met her junior year. She's in nursing school now. And him, another photo, this one of a Latino boy holding a trophy, was headed for juvenile detention when we connected him with a mentoring program. He just got accepted to community college. You change lives. We all change lives, Mitchell. The question is whether we do it intentionally or by accident. You've been changing Chloe's life every day. You just haven't been paying attention to how. The gentle rebuke stung because it was true. I thought providing for her was enough, making sure she had everything she needed, the best schools, every opportunity. Those things matter, but they don't replace presence. Mitchell looked at this woman who'd opened her home to his daughter, who'd sat in an uncomfortable hospital chair for 18 hours, who spoke truth with such gentle authority. Something was shifting inside him, some long frozen part of his heart beginning to thaw. I haven't felt anything like this since Sarah died, he admitted quietly. Lorraine went very still. Like what? Connected to another person, attracted to someone, willing to be vulnerable. He turned to face her fully. You scare me, Lorraine Marlowe. Why? Because you make me want to be better than I am, and because I'm terrified of disappointing another woman I care about. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Lorraine's eyes searched his face, and Mitchell felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with physical nakedness and everything to do with emotional honesty. I scare myself too, she whispered. You're everything I usually avoid. Wealthy, powerful, used to getting what you want, the kind of man who could break my heart without even trying. I would never. You wouldn't mean to. But people like you and people like me, we live in different worlds, Mitchell. What happens when the crisis is over and real life sets in? When you remember that I drive a 10-year-old Honda and live in a one-bedroom apartment? When your business associates meet the foster kid who became your daughter's guidance counselor? The questions hurt because they reflected fears Mitchell hadn't even acknowledged yet. But as he looked at Lorraine, really looked at her, he realized something profound. In the last 36 hours, she'd shown more genuine care for his family than most of his wealthy acquaintances had shown in years. She'd risked her own safety and comfort to help find his daughter. She'd offered her professional expertise, her personal time, and her emotional support without expecting anything in return. You think I care about any of that? He asked. I think you care about it more than you realize. And I think when the emotional intensity of this crisis fades, you'll remember that you're Mitchell Tarot, tech mogul, and I'm just a guidance counselor who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Her words revealed the depth of her insecurity, the ways foster care had taught her to expect abandonment, Mitchell found himself moving closer, drawn by an impulse to comfort her the way she'd comforted his daughter. "You're not just anything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved my relationship with my daughter. You showed me what I was missing, what I was running from. You made me want to be present instead of just successful." Mitchell: "I know this is complicated. I know the timing is terrible and we have every reason to take things slow. But I haven't felt alive like this in 3 years, and I think you feel it too." Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. "I do. God help me, I do. But I'm so scared of getting hurt. So am I." They were sitting very close now, close enough that Mitchell could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of her shampoo. The air between them felt charged, electric with possibility and risk. "We should be smart about this," Lorraine whispered, but she made no move to pull away. "Probably. Take things slow. Focus on Chloe's healing first." "Absolutely." But even as they spoke the words, they were leaning closer. Mitchell's hand found her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. Lorraine's breath caught, and for a moment, the careful walls they'd built around their hearts seemed to dissolve. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a demand. But the moment their lips touched, Mitchell felt something fundamental shift inside him. This wasn't just attraction or gratitude or the desperate need for connection after a crisis. This was recognition, the rare, precious awareness that he'd found someone who saw him completely and chose to stay anyway. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should definitely take this slow," Lorraine whispered against his lips. "Very slow," Mitchell agreed, kissing her again. They might have continued, but Chloe stirred on the couch, mumbling something in her sleep. The sound brought them both back to reality, to the complicated situation they were navigating. "I should get her home," Mitchell said reluctantly. "Yes, you should." But neither of them moved. They sat looking at each other in the lamplight, both aware that something irrevocable had just happened. They'd crossed a line from professional concern to personal connection, from gratitude to genuine attraction. "What happens now?" Mitchell asked. "Now you take your daughter home and start being the father she needs. You both get some sleep. You probably attend family therapy sessions and have a lot of difficult conversations about grief and healing." "And us?" Lorraine's smile was soft but uncertain. "I don't know. This is all new territory for me." "For me too." Mitchell gently woke Chloe, who was groggy but cooperative as they prepared to leave. At the door, she surprised Lorraine with a spontaneous hug. "Thank you," Chloe whispered, "not just for finding me, for caring enough to look." "Always," Lorraine whispered back. "You have my number. Use it if you need anything, okay?" "Okay." Chloe looked between her father and her counselor, and Mitchell wondered if she sensed the tension between them. "Miss Marlowe? Will you come to dinner at our house sometime? Dad makes terrible spaghetti, but we could order pizza." Lorraine glanced at Mitchell, a question in her eyes. "I'd like that very much," she said carefully. The drive home was quiet, Chloe dozing in the passenger seat, Mitchell's thoughts churning with everything that had happened. In less than 48 hours, his world had been turned upside down. He'd nearly lost his daughter, discovered depths of pain he'd never imagined she carried, and found himself falling for a woman who challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. Back at his house, which suddenly felt enormous and sterile after Lorraine's cozy apartment, Mitchell helped Chloe to her room. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but before he could leave, she caught his hand. "Dad, are you going to see Miss Marlowe again? I mean, not just for school stuff." The question caught him off guard. "Would that bother you?" "No." Actually, Chloe's voice was soft, thoughtful. "I think Mom would like her. She always said you needed someone who wouldn't let you hide behind work when things got hard." Mitchell's throat tightened. "Your mother was a wise woman." "Yeah, she was. And I think she'd want us both to be happy, don't you?" "I think she'd want us to heal first, to figure out how to be okay on our own before we add other people to the equation." "But Miss Marlowe isn't other people, is she?" "She's already part of our healing. The wisdom of his 16-year-old daughter continued to amaze him. Chloe was right. Lorraine wasn't separate from their healing process. She was integral to it. She'd been the bridge between Mitchell's grief and his daughter's pain, the translator who helped them understand each other. Get some sleep, sweetheart. We'll figure everything out one day at a time. But as Mitchell lay in his own bed that night, staring at the ceiling of his master bedroom, he couldn't stop thinking about Lorraine. The way she'd held his gaze when she admitted being scared, the softness of her lips, the strength of her hands, the vulnerability in her voice when she'd shared her fears about abandonment. He'd built his business empire by taking calculated risks, by seeing opportunities others missed and acting decisively. But this felt different. This felt like stepping off a cliff with no guarantee of a safe landing. His phone buzzed with a text message. Lorraine. Thank you for trusting me with Chloe's crisis. Sleep well. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you for saving my family. Sweet dreams. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, finally. Mitchell? Yes? I'm scared, but I'm also hopeful. I haven't been hopeful about much in a long time. Me either. Maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe it is. Good night. Good night, Lorraine. Mitchell set his phone aside and closed his eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. For the first time in 3 years, he was thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. And for the first time since Sarah's death, that future included the possibility of love. The next morning brought the complicated reality of integrating crisis revelations into daily life. Chloe woke up physically recovered but emotionally fragile, the way people often feel after major breakthroughs. Mitchell canceled his morning meetings, a decision that would have been unthinkable a week ago, and made breakfast himself instead of leaving it to their housekeeper. Pancakes? Chloe asked, surprised, when she wandered into the kitchen still in Illinois. Her pajamas. I remembered you used to love them when you were little. Before. He didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew he meant before Sarah got sick, before grief changed everything in their house. I still love them. I just didn't think you remembered. Mitchell flipped a pancake with more force than necessary, frustrated by how many small details of his daughter's life he'd forgotten or never learned. I'm going to remember more going forward. They ate together at the kitchen island instead of in the formal dining room, sharing comfortable silence punctuated by small conversations about practical things. Chloe's return to school. She wanted to go back today, to face the situation head-on rather than letting rumors multiply in her absence. Therapy appointments, both individual and family sessions. The photography portfolio she'd been working on for her college applications. I want to include some of the pictures from the warehouse, she said suddenly. Not because I'm glamorizing what happened, but because those spaces, they tell stories about people who've been forgotten. I think there's beauty in abandonment sometimes, not the pain, but the resilience, the way life finds ways to continue even in broken places. Mitchell looked at his daughter with new eyes. She was processing her trauma through her art, finding meaning in her pain without minimizing its reality. When had she become so wise? I'd like to see your portfolio sometime. All of it. Not just the pictures you think I'll approve of. Really? Really. Your mother always said you saw the world differently than other people. I think it's time I paid attention to what you see. Chloe's smile was radiant, and Mitchell realized how long it had been since he'd seen her look genuinely happy. His phone buzzed with a text from Lorraine. How is she this morning? Better, stronger, wise beyond her years. She gets that from her father. The simple compliment warmed him more than it should have. Are you at school today? Yes, full schedule, but I blocked out time this afternoon if you want to discuss Chloe's therapy options. Mitchell stared at the message, reading between the lines. Lorraine was offering a professional reason for them to meet, a safe way to continue their conversation without the emotional intensity of crisis driving their interaction. I'd appreciate your guidance, he replied. My office at 4? I'll be there. The rest of the day passed in a blur of rescheduled meetings, difficult conversations with his business team about shifting priorities, and research into adolescent grief therapy. Mitchell threw himself into understanding his daughter's needs with the same intensity he'd once reserved for hostile takeovers and product launches. But this time, the research felt personal rather than strategic. By 4 o'clock, he was standing outside Lorraine's office at Westfield Academy, nervous in a way that reminded him of being 16 himself. The school hallways were mostly empty, just a few students at lockers and teachers heading home. The building had that quiet, end-of-day feeling that took him back to his own high school years. Lorraine's office was small but welcoming, with 2 comfortable chairs facing each other rather than the traditional desk and visitor setup. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with psychology texts, young adult literature, and photo albums that Mitchell suspected documented years of student success stories. "How was your first day back to reality?" Lorraine asked as she closed the door behind him. "Humbling. I realized I don't know how to balance being a good father with running a company. For 3 years, I've used work as an excuse to avoid dealing with emotions. Now that I want to be present, I don't know how to manage both." It's a common struggle, especially for single parents. They settled into the chairs facing each other, and Mitchell was intensely aware of their proximity. In the afternoon light streaming through her office window, Lorraine looked beautiful, but tired. He wondered if she'd slept any better than he had. "I brought information about family therapists who specialize in adolescent grief," she said, handing him a folder. "Dr. Sarah Chen is excellent. She has experience with high-achieving families where one parent has been emotionally absent due to their own unprocessed trauma." That's a very diplomatic way of describing my situation. "I'm not here to judge your situation, Mitchell. I'm here to help you and Chloe heal from it." They spent an hour discussing therapy options, support groups for grieving families, and practical strategies for rebuilding trust between father and daughter. Lorraine was professional, knowledgeable, and careful to maintain appropriate boundaries. But Mitchell caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, saw the way she unconsciously leaned closer when they were reviewing documents together. "There's something else we need to discuss," she said as their meeting wound down. "Us. The situation we find ourselves in. Mitchell, I care about Chloe deeply, and she's going to need ongoing support as she processes her trauma. But if we..." She paused, searching for words. "If we pursue a personal relationship, it could complicate my ability to be her counselor." Mitchell had been dreading this conversation, while simultaneously knowing it was necessary. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to decide what's most important. Chloe's healing, or whatever this is between us." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Mitchell looked at this remarkable woman who'd already given so much to his family, who was now prepared to sacrifice her own happiness for his daughter's well-being. "What if it doesn't have to be either or?" he asked quietly. "How do you mean?" "What if we're both committed to putting Chloe first, but we also acknowledge that her healing might actually benefit from seeing the adults in her life model healthy relationships? What if taking things very slowly, very carefully, with complete transparency, could actually be part of the solution rather than a complication?" Lorraine considered this, her expression thoughtful. "It would require exceptional care, clear boundaries, probably consultation with other professionals to make sure we're not compromising Chloe's treatment." "I'm willing to do all of that if you are." "And if it doesn't work?" "If the personal relationship interferes with my ability to help Chloe, or if things end badly between us." Mitchell understood what she was really asking. She'd been abandoned before, left to deal with the fallout of adult decisions. She was protecting not just her own heart, but his daughter's well-being. "Then, we put Chloe first. Always. If you ever feel like our personal relationship is compromising your professional judgment, we step back. If I ever make you feel like your position with Chloe is dependent on your feelings toward me, you call me on it immediately. And if we try this and it falls apart? If you realize I'm not what you want once the drama fades?" Mitchell stood and moved to her window, looking out at the school courtyard where students had played and learned and grown for decades. "Lorraine, I've built a billion-dollar company by learning to recognize value when I see it. And what I see in you isn't drama or crisis response. It's integrity, intelligence, strength, and a capacity for love that humbles me." When he turned back to face her, she was crying. "No one's ever said anything like that to me before." "Then you've been surrounded by fools." She laughed through her tears, and the sound made Mitchell's chest tight with emotion. "You realize this is probably the worst idea either of us has ever had?" "Probably. We're going to take it so slow that glaciers will mock our pace." "Absolutely. And Chloe's needs come first always, no matter what." "Without question." Lorraine stood and walked toward him, stopping just close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Okay. Okay? Okay, Mitchell Taro. Let's see if we can figure out how to heal your family and maybe find something beautiful for ourselves in the process." This time, when they kissed, it felt like a promise. Chapter 3. Over the following weeks, Mitchell discovered that real change was messier and more difficult than he'd anticipated. In boardrooms, problems had solutions. Strategies could be implemented with measurable results. But healing a relationship with his daughter and navigating his growing feelings for Lorraine required a different kind of intelligence entirely. The first family therapy session with Dr. Chen was brutal. Sitting in her warmly lit office, listening to Chloe articulate 3 years of accumulated hurt, Mitchell felt every failure as a father laid bare. His daughter spoke with devastating honesty about feeling invisible in her own home, about interpreting his work obsession as evidence that she wasn't worth his attention, about the crushing guilt she carried over her mother's death. "I used to leave my bedroom door open at night," Chloe said during one particularly difficult session, "hoping Dad would check on me before he went to bed. But he always walked past to his office, even when I was crying." Mitchell remembered those nights. He'd heard her crying, had stood in the hallway outside her room wrestling with his own inadequacy. But instead of going in to comfort her, he'd convinced himself she needed space to grieve, that his presence would only remind her of Sarah's absence. Now he realized his avoidance had felt like abandonment to a 13-year-old girl who'd already lost her mother. "I was grieving too," he said quietly, "but that's not an excuse. You needed your father, and I failed you." "I don't need you to be perfect," Chloe replied, her voice stronger than he'd heard it in years. "I just need you to be present. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Dr. Chen helped them develop practical strategies for rebuilding their relationship. Mandatory device-free dinners 3 times a week. A standing Saturday morning breakfast where they'd discuss Chloe's photography projects, and Mitchell would share stories about building his company. Regular check-ins where they could talk about their emotional states without judgment. The changes felt awkward at first, like learning to use muscles that had atrophied from disuse. But gradually, Mitchell began to see glimpses of the relationship they could build together. Chloe was funny, insightful, and surprisingly interested in his work when he explained it in terms of solving problems rather than making money. She had strong opinions about social justice, environmental responsibility, and corporate ethics that challenged his thinking and made him proud of her developing moral compass. Meanwhile, his relationship with Lorraine developed with the careful pace they'd promised each other. They met for coffee after her work hours, taking walks around the city where they could talk without the intensity of school or hospital settings. Mitchell learned about her work with other struggling students, her volunteer time at a local literacy program, her dream of eventually getting a doctorate in adolescent psychology. Lorraine learned about Mitchell's early life, growing up poor in rural Washington, working construction jobs to pay for college, the 12-hour days he'd spent coding in his garage before his first breakthrough. She discovered that his drive for success came not from greed, but from the bone-deep fear of poverty he'd carried since childhood. "You and Chloe are both afraid of the same thing," she observed one evening as they walked along the waterfront. "Abandonment. You just express it differently. She withdraws and tries to become invisible. You accumulate achievements and money as insurance against being left behind." The insight was uncomfortable and accurate. Mitchell had never considered that his workaholism might be driven by the same insecurities that made Chloe afraid to ask for attention. Their physical relationship progressed with deliberate restraint. A brief kiss, good night after coffee dates. His hand holding hers during a movie they attended with Chloe as an unofficial chaperone. The careful brush of her fingers against his arm when she made a point during conversation. But the emotional intimacy grew deeper with each interaction. Lorraine challenged Mitchell's assumptions about success, relationships, and what it meant to be present for another person. Mitchell showed Lorraine what it felt like to be valued for her mind as much as her compassion, to be seen as an equal partner rather than a temporary comfort. The first real test came when Jeremy Walsh, Mitchell's ambitious deputy, made his move for a hostile takeover while Mitchell's attention was focused on family matters. The board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, right in the middle of one of Chloe's therapy sessions. "Go," Lorraine urged when he explained the conflict. "Fight for your company. Chloe and I will handle the session and you can join us for dinner afterward." "I promised I'd put her first." "You are putting her first. You're modeling how to handle competing priorities without abandoning the people who matter most. Go save your company, then come home to your daughter." The board meeting was vicious. Jeremy had done his homework, leveraging Mitchell's recent absences, and shifted priorities to argue for new leadership. But Mitchell fought back with a presentation that reframed his changed approach not as distraction, but as evolution. Tarot Technologies has always been about innovation, he told the board. But innovation without humanity is just clever engineering. These past weeks, I've remembered that our success means nothing if we're not building technology that serves real human needs. I'm not less committed to this company. I'm more committed to making sure it remains worthy of the lives we touch. He won, but barely. The message was clear. The board would tolerate his newfound work-life balance only as long as profits remained strong. That evening, he arrived at Lorraine's apartment to find her, and Chloe cooking dinner together. His daughter was laughing at something Lorraine had said, her face more animated than he'd seen it in months. The domestic scene made his chest tight, with longing for a family life he'd forgotten was possible. "How did it go?" Lorraine asked as he kissed her cheek, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "I won, this time." "Dad kicked ass," Chloe added proudly. "Miss Marlowe showed me the live stream of your presentation. You were amazing." Mitchell was surprised by his daughter's interest in his business battles and touched by her pride in his success. When had she started caring about his work as something more than the thing that kept him away from her? "It felt different this time," he said as they settled around Lorraine's small dining table. "Usually I fight for the company because I can't imagine who I'd be without it. Today I fought because I want to build something worthy of the family I'm trying to create." The words slipped out before he could censor them, and the table fell silent. Mitchell realized he'd just referred to the three of them as a family, implying a future none of them had explicitly discussed. "Is that what this is?" Chloe asked quietly. "Are we becoming a family?" Mitchell looked at Lorraine, whose expression was carefully neutral. They'd agreed to take things slow, to focus on Chloe's healing first. But families weren't built on timelines and careful strategies. They grew from daily choices, shared experiences, and the accumulation of small intimacies. "I'd like us to be," he said carefully, "but only if that's what you both want." "I've never had a real family before," Lorraine said softly. "Foster families were temporary arrangements, professional relationships with personal kindness. But this, sitting around a dinner table, worrying about each other's days, celebrating victories together, I've never had anything like this." "Neither have we, really," Chloe added. "Not since Mom died. We've been living in the same house, but we haven't been a family. Not the way we are when Miss Marlowe is here." Mitchell felt something shift in the room, some invisible barrier falling away. "Lorraine, what would you say to the possibility of us becoming something more permanent?" "I'd say I'm terrified and hopeful in equal measure." "Good. Because that's exactly how I feel." They were interrupted by a knock at Lorraine's door. Mitchell frowned. It was after 8 on a Thursday night, unusual for unexpected visitors. Lorraine looked equally puzzled as she went to answer. The woman standing in the hallway was elegantly dressed, silver-haired, and radiating the kind of cold authority that came from generations of wealth and social position. Mitchell recognized her immediately, though he hadn't seen her in months. "Hello, Mitchell," said Genevieve Tarot, his mother. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Mitchell stood slowly, his body tensing the way it always did in his mother's presence. Genevieve had never approved of his choices, from his decision to marry Sarah, a middle-class teacher rather than someone from their social circle, to his hands-on approach to building his company instead of simply inheriting and managing existing wealth. "Mother, how did you know I was here?" "I make it my business to know where my son spends his evenings, especially when he's making decisions that could affect our family's reputation." Genevieve's eyes swept over Lorraine's modest apartment, taking in the second-hand furniture and cramped space with barely concealed disdain. "May I come in?" Lorraine, to her credit, maintained perfect composure despite the obvious tension. "Of course. I'm Lorraine Marlowe." "Yes, I know who you are, Chloe's guidance counselor, the woman who's been advising my son on family matters." The pause before advising made it clear Genevieve suspected more than professional consultation was taking place. "Grandmother." Chloe's voice was carefully polite, but Mitchell could hear the wariness beneath it. His daughter had always found Genevieve intimidating, though she'd never said so directly. "Hello, darling. I've been worried about you since I heard about your little adventure. Are you feeling better?" "It wasn't a little adventure," Chloe said quietly. "I was in crisis. Miss Marlowe helped save my life." "I'm sure she's been very helpful." Genevieve's tone suggested she found the entire situation somewhat distasteful. "Mitchell, could we speak privately? Anything you have to say can be said in front of Lorraine and Chloe, their family." "Are they?" Genevieve's eyebrows rose. "How interesting. Because I was under the impression that Miss Marlowe was a school employee providing professional services. When did that relationship change into something personal?" Mitchell felt Lorraine tense beside him. His mother had a talent for finding pressure points and applying just enough force to create maximum discomfort. "My relationship with Lorraine is none of your business, Mother." "I'm afraid it is my business when it affects my granddaughter's well-being and my family's reputation." "Do you have any idea how this looks, Mitchell? A wealthy widower pursuing his daughter's high school counselor? The power imbalance alone raises ethical questions." "There's no power imbalance," Lorraine said quietly, but Mitchell could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. "I'm not dependent on Mitchell for my employment or my livelihood." "Perhaps not directly. But surely you understand how others might perceive the situation. A guidance counselor from a modest background involved with one of the wealthiest men in the city. People will assume you're motivated by financial gain." "That's enough." Mitchell's voice carried the same authority he used in hostile board meetings. "You don't get to come into Lorraine's home and insult her character based on classist assumptions." "I'm not insulting anyone, dear. I'm simply pointing out realities that you may not have considered in your, emotional state." Genevieve's smile was sharp. "Miss Marlowe, you seem like a caring person who genuinely wants what's best for Chloe. Surely you can see that a relationship with her father puts you in an impossible position professionally." Mitchell watched Lorraine's face and saw his mother's words hitting their target. Genevieve was skilled at identifying people's deepest insecurities and framing attacks as concern. "I've been very careful to maintain professional boundaries," Lorraine said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "I'm sure you have. But boundaries become meaningless when personal relationships develop, don't they? How can you provide objective counseling to a teenager when you're romantically involved with her father? What happens to Chloe's treatment if this relationship ends badly?" "Grandmother, stop." Chloe's voice was stronger now, anger overriding her usual deference. "Miss Marlowe has helped me more than anyone else. She and Dad aren't hurting me, they're helping me heal." "Sweetheart, you're 16. You don't understand the complexities of adult relationships or professional ethics. I understand that Miss Marlowe loves me, and I understand that Dad is happier than he's been since Mom died. Why would you want to destroy that? Genevieve's expression softened slightly when she looked at her granddaughter. Because I love you too, Chloe. And I've seen what happens when people make emotional decisions without considering long-term consequences. Mitchell realized his mother wasn't just being controlling, she was genuinely afraid. Afraid of losing influence over her family, afraid of changes she couldn't control, afraid of watching her son make what she considered the same mistake twice. Mother, I understand your concerns, but I'm not 17 years old anymore. I'm capable of making my own decisions about my personal life. Are you? Because it seems to me you're repeating patterns, Mitchell. You fell in love with Sarah because she was different from the women in our social circle. Now you're attracted to Miss Marlowe for the same reasons, but love based on novelty and difference rarely survives the reality of daily life. The observation stung because it contained a grain of truth that Mitchell hadn't wanted to examine. Was his attraction to Lorraine partly based on her contrast to the wealthy, polished women he usually encountered? My feelings for Lorraine aren't based on her being different, he said carefully. They're based on her being extraordinary. And what happens when extraordinary becomes ordinary? When the crisis that brought you together is resolved and you settle into routine? What happens when you realize you have nothing in common besides Chloe's problems? Lorraine had gone very quiet, her face pale. Mitchell could see his mother's words burrowing into her consciousness, feeding doubts she'd already harbored about their relationship. I think, Lorraine said quietly, that Mrs. Tarot raises valid concerns that Mitchell and I should discuss privately. No? Mitchell's voice was sharp. We're not going to let my mother's fears dictate our choices. I'm not trying to dictate anything, Genevieve said smoothly. I'm simply offering perspective from someone who's had more experience with marriages across social and economic lines. They're difficult under the best circumstances, Mitchell. When you add professional complications and the pressure of being in the public eye, what are you really asking me to do, Mother? I'm asking you to think carefully about what's best for everyone involved, including Miss Marlowe. Is it fair to ask her to navigate the scrutiny that comes with being in a relationship with you? Is it fair to Chloe to complicate her therapeutic relationship with someone she clearly depends on? Mitchell looked around the room, at his mother's perfectly composed face, at Chloe's worried expression, at Lorraine's growing uncertainty. He realized this was a pivotal moment that would define not just his relationship with Lorraine, but his ability to break generational patterns of emotional control and manipulation. Mother, I appreciate your concern, but I need you to leave now. Genevieve's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? You heard me. This conversation is over. Lorraine is not on trial. Our relationship is not up for debate, and I won't allow you to use Chloe's well-being as a weapon against the people who've actually helped her heal. Mitchell, I'm trying to protect this family. No, you're trying to control this family. Just like you tried to control my marriage to Sarah. Just like you've tried to control my business decisions and my parenting choices. It ends now. Genevieve's composed mask slipped, revealing genuine hurt beneath the manipulation. I'm your mother. I've supported you through every crisis, every challenge. How can you speak to me this way? Because support doesn't come with strings attached, Mother. Love doesn't require other people to make themselves smaller to accommodate your comfort, and family doesn't mean I have to choose between your approval and my happiness. Mitchell moved to stand beside Lorraine, taking her hand in a gesture that was both protective and declarative. Lorraine has shown me what unconditional support looks like. She's helped heal my relationship with my daughter without asking for anything in return. She's made me a better father and a better man. If you can't accept that, if you can't welcome her into our family, then you're choosing to exclude yourself. The room fell silent. Chloe watched with wide eyes as her father finally stood up to the grandmother whose disapproval had shaped family dynamics for as long as she could remember. I see, Genevieve said finally, her voice icy with wounded pride. Well then, I suppose I know where I stand. She gathered her purse and coat with dignified efficiency, every movement radiating aristocratic displeasure. At the door, she paused, Mitchell, I hope you don't live to regret this decision. And, Miss Marlowe. She turned to face Lorraine directly. I hope you understand the responsibility you've taken on. My son doesn't love halfway. When he commits completely. I pray you're worthy of that kind of devotion. After she left, the apartment felt simultaneously relieved and tense. Chloe was the first to speak. Dad, are you okay? You've never talked to grandmother like that before. I'm more than okay. I should have set those boundaries years ago. But when Mitchell looked at Lorraine, he saw that his mother's words had done their intended damage. Despite his defense of her, despite his public choice to prioritize their relationship over his mother's approval, Lorraine looked shaken. She's not wrong about everything, Lorraine said quietly after Chloe had gone home with Mitchell. They were alone in her apartment, cleaning up the dinner dishes, but the domestic intimacy felt strained now. The professional complications, the ethical questions, the scrutiny that comes with your world. Do you want to end this? Mitchell asked directly. Because if you do, tell me now. Don't let my mother's manipulation be the thing that destroys what we're building. Lorraine set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. I don't want to end this. But Mitchell, what if she's right? What if I can't be objective about Chloe's needs because I'm falling in love with her father? What if the novelty wears off and you realize we really don't belong in the same world? Then we'll figure it out together. But we won't make decisions based on fears and what-ifs. This is more than fears and what-ifs. Your mother is connected, influential. She could make things very difficult for me professionally if she wanted to. The admission revealed the depth of Lorraine's vulnerability. She'd built her life on her own merit, her own hard work. The idea that her career could be threatened by powerful people's disapproval was genuinely terrifying. Mitchell moved closer, cupping her face in his hands. Lorraine, look at me. My mother has influence, but she's not omnipotent. Your professional reputation is based on years of excellent work with hundreds of students. One wealthy woman's disapproval can't erase that. You don't understand what it's like to have so little protection. I don't have family money or social connections to fall back on. This job, this career, it's everything I've worked for. Then let me be your protection. Let me be the one who stands between you and anyone who would hurt you because of their connection to me. That's exactly what I can't do. Lorraine's voice was pained but resolute. I can't become dependent on you for my security. That's not love, Mitchell. That's survival. Her words hit him like cold water. Mitchell realized he was inadvertently recreating the power dynamic his mother had criticized, offering to solve Lorraine's problems with his resources, rather than addressing the fundamental inequality between their positions. You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to suggest you needed rescuing. I know you didn't. But that's exactly why this is so complicated. You're used to solving problems with money and influence. I'm used to surviving on my own merit and careful planning. Those approaches don't always mesh well. They stood looking at each other across the small space of her kitchen, both aware they were at a crossroads. The easy intimacy of the past weeks felt fragile now, threatened by external pressures and internal doubts. So what do we do? Mitchell asked. I think we need to slow down even more. Take a step back from the romantic aspect of our relationship and focus on co-parenting Chloe through her healing process. See if what's between us is strong enough to survive without the intensity of crisis and drama. The suggestion felt like a step backward, but Mitchell could see the wisdom in it. Their relationship had developed during emotional extremes. Maybe they needed to discover if they could care for each other during ordinary moments as well. Okay. But Lorraine, this isn't rejection. This is just strategic patience. Strategic patience, she agreed. I like that better than giving up. The next few weeks tested Mitchell's newfound commitment to emotional presence in ways he hadn't anticipated. Stepping back from romantic intimacy with Lorraine while continuing to work together on Chloe's healing required a level of emotional maturity he was still developing. They maintained their co-parenting relationship with professional care. Family therapy sessions continued, with Lorraine participating as Chloe's counselor rather than as Mitchell's romantic interest. They attended Chloe's photography exhibition at school together, sitting carefully apart but united in their pride for her achievement. The exhibition itself was a revelation. Chloe had curated a collection titled Beauty in Broken Places, featuring photographs from abandoned buildings, forgotten neighborhoods, and overlooked corners of the city. But rather than depicting only decay and neglect, her images captured moments of unexpected life. Flowers growing through concrete, children playing in empty lots, elderly couples sharing benches in overlooked parks. "She sees hope where others see only problems," Lorraine murmured as they studied one particular photograph, a shaft of sunlight illuminating graffiti that read, "Still here," on the wall of a demolished building. "She learned that from you," Mitchell replied quietly. "No, she learned it from surviving her own broken places. I just helped her recognize the strength she already had." Watching his daughter discuss her work with classmates and teachers, Mitchell was struck by her confidence and articulate passion. This was the young woman Lorraine had seen all along, brilliant, resilient, and capable of transforming pain into purpose. After the exhibition, the three of them went for ice cream, maintaining the careful boundaries they'd established. But Mitchell caught Lorraine watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, and she caught him studying her profile when she laughed at one of Chloe's stories. The underlying attraction hadn't disappeared. If anything, watching Lorraine maintain professional excellence while navigating their complicated personal situation only deepened Mitchell's respect and desire for her. The moment of truth came 3 weeks later, during what should have been a routine family therapy session. Dr. Chen had been working with them on communication strategies, helping Mitchell and Chloe develop language for discussing difficult emotions without triggering each other's defenses. "I have something I want to say," Chloe announced halfway through the session. She looked at Dr. Chen, then at her father, then at Lorraine. "I know you all think you're protecting me by pretending there's nothing romantic between Dad and Miss Marlowe, but I'm not stupid, and I'm not fragile." Mitchell felt his stomach drop. "Chloe, let me finish." His daughter's voice carried new authority. "Miss Marlowe, you've been different the past few weeks. More careful, more distant. And Dad, you've been walking around like someone took away your favorite thing. You both think I don't notice because you're still professional and polite with each other. But I see how you look at each other when you think no one's watching." Dr. Chen leaned forward with interest. "How does that make you feel, Chloe?" "Frustrated. Because they are making themselves miserable trying to protect me from something that actually makes me happy." "Can you explain what you mean?" "Before Miss Marlowe, Dad was just going through the motions of living. Working all the time, being polite and distant, never really connecting with anything or anyone. When he's around her, he's more present, more alive. He listens better, laughs more, even argues with more passion. Why would I want him to give that up?" Mitchell stared at his daughter, amazed once again by her wisdom and perception. "And Miss Marlowe," Chloe continued, turning to face her counselor directly, "you've spent your whole career helping other people find the courage to be vulnerable and authentic. But you're letting fear keep you from your own happiness. How is that different from what you've been teaching me about not letting trauma dictate my choices?" The room fell silent. Dr. Chen looked between all three of them with the expression of someone watching a therapeutic breakthrough unfold in real time. "Chloe raises some important points, Doctor," Chen said carefully. "Mitchell, Lorraine, how do you respond to her observations?" Mitchell looked at Lorraine, seeing his own emotions reflected in her eyes: love, fear, hope, and the recognition that they'd been overthinking what their hearts already knew. "I think," Lorraine said slowly, "that your daughter is wiser than both of us combined. I think she's right that we've been protecting her from something that might actually benefit her healing," Mitchell added. "Modeling healthy adult relationships instead of emotional avoidance." "So what now?" Chloe asked, and Mitchell heard hope in her voice. Dr. Chen smiled. Now we talk about what healthy boundaries look like when two adults care about each other and share responsibility for a teenager's well-being. We discuss how to maintain professional ethics while honoring personal feelings, and we explore how Chloe feels about the possibility of her family structure changing. The conversation that followed was one of the most honest and productive they'd ever had. By the end of the session, they'd established guidelines that felt sustainable for everyone. Lorraine would continue as Chloe's counselor through the end of the school year, with regular check-ins with Dr. Chen to ensure her personal feelings weren't compromising her professional judgment. Mitchell and Lorraine would pursue their relationship openly but gradually, with Chloe's input on major decisions. And all three of them would commit to ongoing family therapy to navigate the unique challenges of their situation. Walking out of Dr. Chen's office together, Mitchell felt lighter than he had in weeks. The careful distance he'd maintained from Lorraine suddenly felt artificial and unnecessary. "So," he said as they reached the parking garage, "would you like to have dinner?" "All three of us. No professional boundaries, no careful choreography, just us." "I'd love that," Lorraine replied, and her smile was radiant. "Can we go somewhere fancy?" Chloe asked. "I want to dress up and celebrate feeling like a real family." "Anywhere you want," Mitchell promised, and meant it. That evening, sitting in an elegant restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay, Mitchell watched his daughter and the woman he was falling in love with discuss art, literature, and social justice with passionate intelligence. Chloe was animated and confident, her trauma becoming part of her story rather than the whole of it. Lorraine was relaxed and genuine, her professional guard down in a way that revealed the full warmth of her personality. "I have an announcement," Mitchell said as they finished their main course. Both women looked at him expectantly. "I've decided to restructure my role at Tarot Technologies. I'm promoting Jeremy to CEO, with careful oversight, obviously, and transitioning myself to chairman of the board. It means less day-to-day operational responsibility and more time for the things that actually matter." "Dad, are you sure?" Chloe looked worried. "Your company is everything to you." "No, sweetheart. It was everything to me when I didn't have anything else worth living for. Now I do." Mitchell reached across the table to take Lorraine's hand, a gesture that still sent electricity through him every time their skin touched. "I want to be present for your senior year of high school. I want to take real vacations and have weeknight dinners and be the kind of man who shows up when the people he loves need him." "And what about us?" Lorraine asked quietly, squeezing his fingers. "I want to date you properly, take you to concerts and art galleries and quiet dinners where we can talk for hours. I want to introduce you to my friends as my girlfriend, not just Chloe's counselor. I want to see if we can build something real and lasting outside of crisis management." Lorraine's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I'd like that too. Very much." "And I want to be part of it," Chloe added. "Not in a weird way, but I want us to be a family. The kind that does things together and talks about everything and doesn't pretend difficult things don't exist." Mitchell looked around the table at these two remarkable women who'd taught him that success meant nothing without love, that presence was more valuable than presence, and that healing happened in relationship rather than isolation. "Then that's what we'll be," he promised, "a real family, complicated, imperfect, and absolutely worth fighting for." Chapter 4. The months that followed weren't without challenges. Learning to be a family while building a romantic relationship required constant communication, flexibility, and the kind of emotional courage none of them had needed to develop before. Mitchell discovered that stepping back from daily operations at Tarot Technologies was harder than he'd anticipated. 20 years of habits didn't disappear overnight, and there were moments when his phone buzzed with urgent business matters that made his palms sweat with the need to take control. But each time he felt that familiar pull toward work avoidance, he looked at Chloe, engaged in her photography, applying to colleges, laughing with friends, and remembered what really mattered. Lorraine struggled with the visibility that came with dating one of Seattle's most prominent businessmen. The first time their photograph appeared in a society magazine, she called in sick to work and spent the day questioning whether she was making a terrible mistake. But when several parents reached out to thank her for her work with their children, when her principal praised her dedication and professionalism, she realized that her worth wasn't diminished by public attention. Chloe navigated senior year with the confidence of someone who'd survived her worst fears and found herself stronger on the other side. Her college application essay about finding beauty in broken places earned her acceptances to several prestigious art programs. More importantly, she developed tools for managing her anxiety and depression that would serve her well beyond high school. The real test came 6 months after Genevieve's confrontational visit, when Mitchell received an unexpected phone call from his mother's attorney. Genevieve was in the hospital, having suffered a heart attack during what should have been a routine charity board meeting. "She's asking for you," the attorney explained. "The doctors say she's stable, but she's quite insistent about seeing you and Chloe." Mitchell found his mother looking smaller than he'd ever seen her, dwarfed by the hospital bed and medical equipment. Her silver hair was disheveled, her usually perfect makeup absent, revealing the vulnerability beneath her aristocratic facade. "Mitchell." Her voice was weaker, but carried the same authoritative tone. "Thank you for coming." "Of course I came. You're my mother." "And Chloe?" "In the hallway with Lorraine. I wanted to speak with you first." Genevieve's expression tightened slightly at Lorraine's name, but she nodded. "I suppose she's still part of your life." "She's going to be part of my life permanently, Mother. I'm planning to ask her to marry me." The words surprised Mitchell as much as they surprised Genevieve. He hadn't consciously decided to propose, but saying it aloud felt right in a way that made his chest warm with certainty. "I see." Genevieve was quiet for a long moment, studying her son's face. "You look happy, Mitchell." "Genuinely happy. I haven't seen you look that way since before Sarah got sick." "I am happy. Lorraine and Chloe have taught me what it means to be present for the people you love, even when it's difficult." "Even when it means disappointing your mother?" The question carried genuine hurt beneath its accusatory tone. Mitchell realized that his mother's controlling behavior came from her own fears of abandonment and irrelevance. "Mother, I'm not trying to hurt you. But I can't live my life based on your approval anymore. I'm 42 years old. I need to make my own choices, even when they're not the choices you would make." Genevieve sighed, and for the first time Mitchell could remember, she looked genuinely vulnerable. "I've been thinking about our last conversation, about the things you said. I was angry." "No, you were right. I've been trying to control your life. I convinced myself it was protection, but—" She trailed off, looking older than her 70 years. "Your father and I had a terrible marriage, Mitchell. We stayed together for appearances, for social expectations, for financial convenience. But we were miserable. I didn't want that for you. So you tried to prevent me from making my own mistakes. And in doing so, I nearly prevented you from finding real happiness." Genevieve's eyes filled with tears. "I want to meet her properly, Miss Marlowe, not as an adversary, but as the woman my son loves." The conversation that followed was awkward but genuine. Lorraine entered the hospital room with Chloe, both women clearly nervous but determined to honor family obligations. Genevieve apologized for her previous behavior, acknowledging that her fears had made her cruel. Lorraine graciously accepted the apology while maintaining appropriate boundaries. But the breakthrough came when Chloe showed her grandmother the portfolio that had earned her a full scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design. As Genevieve studied the photographs, her expression shifted from polite interest to genuine admiration. "These are extraordinary, darling. You have a gift for seeing strength in places others would overlook." "Miss Marlowe taught me that," Chloe said simply. "She helped me understand that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from healing." Genevieve looked at Lorraine with new eyes. "Thank you for helping my granddaughter find her voice." "She always had it," Lorraine replied. "She just needed someone to listen." Over the following weeks, as Genevieve recovered from her heart attack, the family dynamics slowly shifted. It wasn't a complete transformation. Decades of patterns don't change overnight. But there was a new willingness to communicate directly rather than through manipulation, to acknowledge different perspectives rather than demanding conformity. The proposal, when Mitchell finally made it official, happened in the most ordinary of circumstances. He and Lorraine were cleaning up after a Sunday dinner at his house. Chloe had gone upstairs to work on college preparations, and they found themselves alone in the kitchen, sharing comfortable silence. "I told my mother I was going to ask you to marry me," Mitchell said suddenly, causing Lorraine to nearly drop the plate she was drying. "You what?" "At the hospital. It just came out, but the moment I said it, I knew it was true." He set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. "Lorraine Marlowe, I know this is the least romantic proposal in history, but will you marry me?" "Mitchell, we've been officially dating for 6 months. Don't you think? I think I've been falling in love with you since the night you texted me about finding Chloe. I think you've made me a better father, a better man, and a better human being. I think Chloe adores you and needs you in her life permanently. And I think I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the trust you've given me." Lorraine set down her dish towel, tears streaming down her face. "That's actually the most romantic proposal in history." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes, Mitchell Taro, to all of it. To being your wife, to being Chloe's stepmother, to building a life together that's messy and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for." When they told Chloe, she burst into tears of joy and immediately began planning their wedding with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never had a reason to believe in happy endings before. Sometimes love means risking everything you've built for something even more precious. Mitchell faced an impossible choice: protect his family's legacy or fight for the woman who saved his daughter's life and transformed his world. Have you ever had to choose between what looked safe and what felt right in your heart? Share your story in the comments and hit subscribe if you're as invested in Mitchell and Lorraine's love as I am. The wedding took place 8 months later in the garden of Mitchell's home, transformed into something magical. Chloe served as maid of honor, her photographs from the engagement session displayed throughout the venue as artistic decorations. Keisha stood as Lorraine's matron of honor, weeping throughout the entire ceremony. Even Genevieve attended, having developed a grudging respect for her new daughter-in-law's strength and integrity. But the moment that defined the day came during Mitchell's vows, when he looked directly at both Lorraine and Chloe as he spoke. "Lorraine, you taught me that presence is more valuable than success, that vulnerability is a form of strength, and that healing happens in relationship rather than isolation. You saved my daughter's life, but more than that, you gave us both a reason to believe in love again." He turned to Chloe, who was crying openly. "And sweetheart, thank you for being brave enough to run away that night. Thank you for forcing me to confront the father I'd become and the man I wanted to be. Thank you for teaching me that families aren't just born. They're built day by day, choice by choice, with courage and commitment and unconditional love." Lorraine's vows were equally powerful, speaking about finding family in unexpected places, about learning to believe she deserved love that didn't require her to make herself smaller, and about the joy of building a future with people who saw her completely and chose to stay. The reception lasted late into the evening, filled with speeches from Chloe's friends, colleagues who'd watched Lorraine transform struggling students, and business associates who'd witnessed Mitchell's evolution from workaholic to present father and partner. As the evening wound down, the three of them, now officially a family, sat on the terrace overlooking the city lights. Chloe was leaving for art school in 3 weeks, beginning her adult life with the confidence and emotional tools she'd developed through therapy and family healing. "Are you nervous about leaving?" Lorraine asked, settling into Mitchell's arms as they watched their daughter pack her camera equipment. "A little, but mostly excited. For the first time in my life, I'm not running away from something. I'm running toward something. And I know you'll both be here when I come home." Mitchell felt a profound sense of completion. His daughter was thriving, preparing for college with genuine enthusiasm rather than escape-driven desperation. His wife, the word still made him smile, had transformed not just their family, but his understanding of what love could be. and he had learned to be present for both joy and sorrow, success and failure, ordinary moments and extraordinary revelations. "What are you thinking about?" Lorraine murmured against his shoulder. "I'm thinking about that night in the warehouse when you told me I had to be willing to change. Really change. I had no idea what that meant then. And now? Now I know it meant learning to show up, for all of it. The messy, complicated, beautiful reality of loving people who are strong enough to love me back." Later that night, after Chloe had gone to bed and they'd finished cleaning up from the reception, Mitchell and Lorraine sat in their living room, no longer his house or her apartment, but their home, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Chloe hadn't run away that night?" Lorraine asked. Every day I'm grateful that sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the doorways to our best ones. She saved us all, didn't she? By being brave enough to ask for help in the only way she knew how. She did. But so did you, by being brave enough to text a stranger in the middle of the night. And so did I, eventually, by being brave enough to choose love over control. They sat in comfortable silence, both aware that their story wasn't ending, but beginning. There would be challenges ahead: Chloe's adjustment to college, the ongoing work of blending their different backgrounds and perspectives, the daily choices required to maintain the emotional intimacy they'd built. But they'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth growing with, worth fighting for, worth showing up for day after day, choice after choice, until presence became as natural as breathing. "Mitchell? Thank you for trusting me with your family. Thank you for teaching me what family means." As they headed upstairs together, Mitchell caught sight of one of Chloe's photographs hanging in the hallway, an image of sunrise breaking through storm clouds over the Seattle skyline. The photo was titled "After the Rain," and it captured everything beautiful about finding light in darkness, hope in brokenness, love in the most unexpected places. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary crises. A teenage daughter running away in the rain, a guidance counselor willing to help, a father learning that success means nothing without presence, and three people discovering that families aren't just born, they're built with patience and courage and the radical decision to show up for each other, especially when it's hard. 6 months later, Chloe called them from her dorm room, excited to share news of her first gallery exhibition. As Mitchell and Lorraine listened to their daughter's animated description of her latest work, they realized that healing wasn't a destination, but a journey. One they would continue taking together, one choice at a time, for the rest of their lives. "I have to go," Chloe said finally, "but I love you both. Thank you for giving me a family worth coming home to." After they hung up, Mitchell and Lorraine sat holding hands in the evening light, surrounded by the life they'd built together from the ashes of their separate sorrows. They'd learned that love doesn't eliminate pain, it provides the strength to face it together. They'd discovered that presence is the greatest gift one person can give another. And they'd found that sometimes the most broken places become the most beautiful when tended by caring hands. Sometimes the most unexpected crises bring the most necessary people into our lives. Mitchell thought success meant control, but learned it meant having the courage to trust. Lorraine believed she was meant to save others, but discovered she deserved saving too. And Chloe found that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to love again, despite the risk of loss. Have you ever had someone unexpected become exactly what you needed during your darkest moment? Someone who saw your worth when you couldn't see it yourself? Share your story of unexpected love in the comments below. Let me know where you're watching from around the world, and hit that subscribe button for more stories about finding love when you least expect it, but need it most. Tomorrow, we'll explore another tale of hearts that heal each other. Until then, remember, sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the greatest fears.